You came back to your By Crafty bestie to finish off this sweater. Let's do this. Hello everybody and welcome back to the Sazerac Knit Cable Sweater. I am so happy you are joining us on this 3-week make-along journey to make this amazingly beautiful sweater. By this point, you should have completed your homework all the way up to where it's time to add the sleeves and separate for the front and back of your body. This far into the project, you have worked in the round from the bottom of your sweater all the way up to what will now be your armpit, right? Your armpit area. We have read our instructions in the round, whether it was on the chart or in the written instructions. It's at this point where we are going to separate the front and back of our sweater, and for the remainder of the sweater, we will be working flat, or in other words, we will be working back and forth on just the front or just the back of the sweater. So this is the first part of your instructions. As we continue on with this sweater pattern, you want to make sure that you're following along with the worked flat written instructions for the cable panel, or if you're reading the chart, make sure you're reading the chart back and forth in rows as you're working the chart. That way you can maintain your established cable pattern from the body of your work all the way up through the front and the back of your sweater. Okay, that's a big change that's going on from the bottom of the sweater to the top of the sweater. So we want to try and maintain our gauge on the two. We want them to match as perfect as you possibly can. So it's going to be very important as you're working in these rows up the top, right? It's not rounds at the bottom, but rows at the top. You want to make sure that every single row is the correct size and has the same gauge as the bottom of your sweater. In order to knit just the front or just the back of our sweater, the first thing we're going to do is separate our stitches. So we will have stitches that we will only work on for the front of our sweater and stitches we will work on for the back of our sweater. Once we have decided what that number is, it's written in the pattern, then we get to cast on stitches for our sleeve. And I want you to notice that the sleeve right here is just a continuation of our already established cable panel pattern that we have been working on the whole body of our sweater. So we are going to maintain our established cable panel instructions across the body of our sweater, and then we will extend those out across the sleeves on both sides, right? On the right sleeve and the left sleeve. This really isn't a difficult thing to do once you're able to orient yourself with those stitch markers. You're using your stitch markers, right? If you aren't using your stitch markers yet, you want to make sure you're using them now so that way you know where you are in your pattern, okay? You want to do that. In order to get started with all of this, go ahead and grab your instructions for separating of the armholes. Make sure you have your written instructions for the cable panel worked flat. And if you like the chart, make sure you have your cable panel chart. Now I'm just talking to all of you right here in the VIP upgrade experience. You are super lucky because you not only have the cable panel chart, but you have the full chart for the front of the sweater and the back of the sweater. So you get to see exactly how many cable repeats are worked across and what the sleeve stitches look like continuing that pattern. So it's very, very useful for you to use that chart. Make sure you have downloaded your cable PDF for the size you are making so you can very quickly and easily see how the continuation of your cable pattern established works with those sleeves. You're going to find that super duper helpful. Grab your homework, grab your stitch holders, and let's jump in. Okay, everybody, before I begin teaching you how to do this portion of the sweater, I want to let you know I'm going to take some extra time in this video to really discuss how you're going to add on those stitches, why we're moving stitches around, and how we maintain that cable panel across the sweater. There's going to be a lot of talking, a lot of discussion, so make sure you do have your written pattern with you, your chart in front of you, and if you're somebody who likes to take notes, have a pencil with you so you can take some notes. If at any point in time in this video you need to hit pause so that way you can kind of work ahead to kind of see what I'm talking about, that is perfectly okay. Please feel free to hit pause whenever you need to. But I do plan on teaching this video like it's a class with me. So I'm going to just kind of roll right through everything how I would instruct it in class. All right. Having said that, let's begin by separating the body of our work so that way we can get a front and a back. The first thing we want to do is remove that stitch marker that indicates the beginning of the round. We're no longer going to work in rounds on our sweater. We are going to be working back and forth in rows on the front and on the back. So we don't need that beginning marker. The next thing you're going to see is it says to slip the first 2 or 3 stitches, and we're going to move those to the back of our work. So here's what's going down so that you can kind of understand what's happening. When we cast on stitches for our sleeve, it's a continuation of our cable panel, right? Our cable panels, no matter what size you're starting with, it begins with this really nice big cable, whether it's a 3/3 right cable or a 2/2 right cable. What we want to do is we're essentially going to separate this cable, and we're going to put 3 stitches on the back or 2 stitches on the back, depending on what size you're making. And we'll do that on both sides. So we'll do it over here on the right half of the front and then the left half of the front. And what will happen then is as we cast on stitches for the sleeve, we will cast on extra stitches, okay? And it will create it so that way this cable looks like it's coming up the side of our body, like the side of our body, and then separates off and creates 2 individual cables, one on the front and one on the back. So that way, as we come up here to the top and graft, they meet up together. Okay, so in order to do that, to make it so that way we are going from one cable to then have that cable continue up on the front and continue up over here to the side, we have to begin by moving stitches. Now you'll move the stitches here at the start, and then as we work across our sweater, you'll notice that the instructions tell you to work over a set number of stitches. And what you will notice is that we'll leave a certain number of stitches at the end of our already established cable panel, and we'll move those stitches to the back. Okay, does that make sense so far? Hopefully it does. Once you put it into action, it will make a lot more sense. Just think of it, we have these nice cable panels working up the side of our sweater, and we're gonna split it in half so that way we can get a cable up the front and a cable up the back. Okay, now, after we have removed the stitch marker and then slipped stitches, we are going to continue on by casting on some stitches for the sleeves. Now, the number of stitches you cast on is determined by the size you're making, clearly. And what I want you to do, this is the easiest way for me to write the pattern up, is I want you to grab 2 stitch holders, okay? So these are really handy because they kind of look like a double pointed needle, and then this holds some stitches. We're gonna cast on stitches, and I like to put them on this holder. And then what we will do is we will work off the holder and then create the sleeve. So you'll have one for the left sleeve, one for the right sleeve, okay? So you're gonna cast on stitches. I like to use the long tail cast on. You now know how to do that, so I don't need to show you how to do that. Simply cast on those stitches on your holder and cast on the amount written, okay, right here. You see that? Once you get those stitches cast onto your holder, think of these as your sleeves. That's what they are. These are your sleeve stitches. So if this is the body of your work, you're going to have sleeves over here and sleeves over here. So what will happen is as we work across the sleeves and then continue on through the half of your work essentially on the body and then continue on to the other sleeve, we're going to continue working that cable panel. Okay. Now that cable panel is determined by the size you're making. Just like in section 1 where we talked about the body, each pattern size has its own chart. So you will follow along with the chart or the written instructions, which is for the chart for the size you are making. You want to continue on with that. So it's at this point you're going to go to the instructions for the size you are making, and what we will do is you will work across the number of stitches you cast on, and it will bring you right up to where you have either 2 or 3 stitches left over right here. Okay, so you'll have, think of all of those stitches on there. You work across up to this point, and then you continue on with your established pattern. When you get to the other side, you will take the other set of cast on and you put it up and continue on working. So in order to demonstrate this the easiest, I'm going to pull in the chart that the VIP experience people have to show you what it looks like to have all of the stitches from the sleeves and the body charted out as one. So that way, hopefully you can kind of get a good visual of what it is we're doing. All right. Okay, before I talk about this, I do want to mention that the free version of this pattern does include the cable panel charts for each size that you can use in conjunction with your written instructions to complete the front and back of your sweater. But if you upgraded to the VIP, you have the luxury of having this beautiful chart that includes all of the sections that you are working on from the body and the sleeve. So let's kind of get ourselves oriented here. We know that our cable panel chart is represented in this chart from that section there, right? And from this section right here coming up, and then this section right here coming across, right? Those are the three panels of our body. And so when we cast on stitches here, you can be like, okay, that means there's 8 stitches over here, and there's clearly more than 8 over here. It's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. But Marley, the pattern says I'm only gonna add 10. What's happening? Let me tell you what's happening here, okay? So as we cast on 10 stitches, remember, stitch 9 and 10 of our body, we've moved out of the way, right? That was right here, this part of the instructions where it says slip the first 2 stitches. So we moved 9 and 10 out of the way. So 9 and 10 right here, those have been moved to the back. So that way those will be worked on the back. So as we cast on 10 stitches here, 10 stitches, that is going to make up the 2 stitches that we moved to the back. Those last 2 stitches of our 10 are going to continue on to make that cable panel right there. Okay, if we are adding 10 stitches to the right half of our sweater and it makes up for the 2 stitches that we moved out of that cable, right? So that way the cable splits like I talked about earlier. What about on the left side of our sweater? Do we have to move stitches there as well? The answer is yes, but it's not written in such a clear way in the pattern in that we're not going to get to a point and say, oh, move these stitches. I'm telling you in the pattern to work across a set number of stitches, and then you'll notice that will leave you 2 or 3 stitches left on your actual body, and that's when you'll move those. So for example, on this one here, again, this is the small, extra small, you would work down across 70 stitches. And when you get down across 70 stitches, that puts you right here within, this would be stitch number 82 on the chart. And so that leaves you with all of these stitches right here, right? Well, if we don't include those there that I'm covering up with my finger, the last 2 stitches here of 84 and 83, those 2, we will not work into those 2 stitches. We will literally put those 2 stitches on the back needle with the other stitches from the body we are not going to use. Then when I cast on 10 stitches over here, it will make up for that stitch 84 and 83 on my chart. So the 10 stitches here will once again coincide with all of the rest of the cable panel, and I'll be able to use the first 2 stitches of this left half, right, to continue on with that cable. If you're working one of the other sizes, I have to say this again because somebody will miss it. Make sure you're following the instructions for the size you're making. These are the instructions for the extra small, small. But as you look at the other sizes, let's just go up here. Here's the extra large 2X. You can see it looks slightly different, right? There's a different sequence. And that's because your cable panel is different than the extra small, small. Same thing for the medium large. Your cable panel is slightly different than the extra small, small. So your instructions are going to be different. But at the end of the day, if you think of these sections right here, we know that we have 6 cable panels in the round for our body, right? We are going to use 3 of them on the front and 3 of them on the back. We're adding extra stitches so that way we are continuing this cable panel and extending it out to this distance, right? So if you wanted to use stitch markers here, you could be like, I have a stitch marker right here. I have a stitch marker right here. I have a stitch marker right here. And I would even venture to say I'd put a marker. I think I even wrote it in the pattern to put a marker right there. So this is a marker at the start of a cable panel that you'd be reading across. Here's a cable at the start of a cable panel. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Here's a marker at the start of your cable panel, a marker at the start of your second cable panel, a marker at the start of your third cable panel. This marker here just lets you know, oh, these last few stitches, they're going to be a little bit different than what's on your regular cable panel because it's a partial panel, right? These first stitches over here, these first 8 stitches, it's a partial panel. It doesn't go completely across. You're going to have to be honest with me and let me know if what I'm saying makes sense. Is it clear? Ultimately, I just want you to understand that by adding a set number of stitches for the sleeves at the start and a set number of stitches at the sleeves at the end of either the front or on the back, you will continue that cable panel that you've established on the body through those sleeve stitches. Okay, so as you look at this, we have these 10 stitches here that are just an extenuation of the cable panel, right? These 10 stitches here, they're just an extenuation of the cable panel. So if you look at your body that you've already completed, we discussed we have 6 cable panels all the way around our body. So if we count this as 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is the start of 4, right? And this here is the end of 6. So if you look at the body of your work and you think to yourself, okay, this cable panel, if I think of that as the side of my sweater, and I see this cable panel, I think of that as the side of my sweater. I am just taking that cable panel on the side of my sweater and splitting those stitches apart so that way that cable can continue up the front and continue up the back. Hopefully that is very clear, all right? At the end of the day, if you just follow the written instructions as written and just do it word for word without overthinking it, you'll get in the place you need to be. All of a sudden, all the stitches will be cast on, you'll know exactly where you are in the pattern, and you just continue on with your established pattern. You will continue on working the stitches outside over here as they are written in the pattern. It tells you exactly what those stitches are on your panel. And then these stitches over here, you would continue on working on your sweater. Okay. Same thing applies as you look at the other sizes. I want to make sure that we're very, very, very clear here. Each size has its own chart, right? We all know that. So the beginning, the beginning sleeves and the ending sleeve count and instructions are going to be different for each size. So make sure you're following along with the size you are making. Okay, so having said all of that, I want to point out something that I think is really great, especially when we consider making projects and minimizing the amount of finishing that we have, because I consciously chose these sleeves and the length of them for this very purpose. You guys ready? Okay, so follow along with me here. When we started our sweater, we started with seed stitch, right? Making this a very nice hem. It's not going to curl on us. It looks beautiful. We continue using that seed stitch through the body of our sweater, right? It looks great. So why not make it so when I add stitches for my sleeve, I make it so that way the sleeve edge is also seed stitch, right? Just like my bottom edge. And it makes it so that I don't have to come back over here and do any sort of extra finishing on my sleeve because the seed stitch edge looks nice and clean and pulled together, so I don't have to do any more finishing. My only finishing is going to be the seam on the bottom of my sleeve and then my shoulder seam, right? For the same reason, I chose to do seed stitch around the neckline. So when we get to that, you'll notice there's seed stitch there too. The reason for it is to make the neckline, the sleeve, and the hem all look nice together and be really cohesive with the seed stitch inside the body. So I didn't just arbitrarily choose that point on my chart to, extend the sleeves out to. There's a very specific reason why I made the sleeves that long. Plus, I didn't want really long sleeves and run the risk of having to do special finishing. I wanted the nice short sleeve pullover shell sort of sweater that I could wear with a tank top underneath, or if I wanted a long sleeve shirt, I could put it over a long sleeve shirt. But I really wanted to make sure that my finishing was not super extreme. I wanted to be able to be like, hey, when I'm done with this, I just have a little bit of grafting and I'm done. I don't have to do any sort of extra finishing. So that is why the sleeves are shorter, and that is why we end on the seed stitch, okay? It makes everything look really nice and neat. All right, I know there are some of you out there that are like, I hadn't even thought about that. That's such a good point. I'm so happy I don't have to do any extra finishing. Then there are others that are like, yeah, I figured that out long ago. Whichever camp you're in, I'm still happy you're here and that we get to work on this together. How you feeling? Pretty good so far? Okay, what I want to do next is walk you through a little demonstration of how you would transition from stitches on your holder to the body of your work. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my holder and I'm just going to cast on 10 stitches. And I'm using a different color yarn on purpose, so that way hopefully you can kind of see how the work would look different. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then there's 10. So I'd cast on 10 stitches and just cut my yarn. All right, I would do that for both sides. So that would be one side, and then I'll use this again. Let's just get our 10 stitches on here. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Click that. Make sure when you cut your yarn off, so that way they're just kind of hanging out there, that you leave enough to weave something in, okay? All right, so these would represent my sleeves. I'm going to set those aside, and let's take a look at this. This is my swatch that I've worked up a little bit. Clearly it's not as long as what the body would normally be, but it kind of gives you an idea of what's happening. So I am right here at the start of my round. So if you think of this, this is the side of my sweater. So if I were to position my needles just like so, this would be the front of my sweater. That would be the back of my sweater. And notice there's a cable right here on this side, and there's a cable right here on this side. Hopefully seeing my actual swatch here gives you a better sense of where you are in the pattern. Now the next part of the instructions say to remove your beginning round stitch markers. So I'm going to remove that. And then you're supposed to slip 2 or 3 stitches depending on the size you're making. Now this is an extra small, so I'm going to slip 2 stitches. Notice I'm using my right hand needle. I'm just going in as if to purl and slipping it over, going in as if to purl and slipping it over. Okay. Now I have a choice to make. I can either continue on working with just this set of needles until I get to where I'm supposed to be on the other side of my sleeve, and then put all of these stitches like on a piece of scrap yarn. Or if I have another set of needles that are this size, but another set of needles, I can continue working on the front onto my new set of needles. And what will happen is when I get over here to where I'm supposed to add my other sleeve, I will have all of my stitches on my new needle, and all of my back stitches will be on the needle I was using, and I could just let it hang out there. It makes it so much easier to pick up your work and work on the back of your sweater if you're able to do that. So if you have an extra set of needles, do that. If you don't, what I want you to do is grab your beginning round marker again and put it on there, just so you know, hey, that's where we're starting the actual front. So that way when we turn our work and come back, you know that when you reach this, that's where you need to end. Or at the same time, if we put all these stitches on a marker, you know that it's at that point that you don't go any further, because these are all the front, okay? We're going to continue on working with both of these needles. And the first thing I'm going to have you do is grab the stitches that you cast on and put on a holder for your sleeve. And with the tail of the cast on, if you did the long tail cast on, I want you to slip all of those onto your left hand needle. Now, yes, you could absolutely knit these directly from your holder, but I find it so much easier to knit them directly off of my left hand needle, sort of just like why I like knitting my cables off of my left hand needle. I just find it so much easier than knitting from a holder, okay? When you slip those on, you want to make sure the tail is furthest in, right? You don't want the tails out here towards the tip. You want them in, okay? Once your sleeve stitches are on your left hand needle, it's time to rejoin your working yarn to your work. And we're gonna start working back and forth. So knowing that we're not working in the round anymore, I'm actually gonna pull this right hand needle just out a little bit, and I'm gonna use it a little bit like this, okay? And using your working yarn, and here's a little side note, I'm using different colored yarn here so that way you can see the stitches. You begin following along with the written instructions. So for me, I'm supposed to knit my first stitch, and my next stitch is a 2/1 left purl cable. So these first two stitches, I'm going to hold to the front. I will I will purl the next stitch. So make sure my yarn is forward, make sure I'm not using the tail. Cable needle, hold those forward, purl the next stitch. And this is finicky, right? Because, I mean, we just have cast on stitches here to work with. And then just like I put the stitches back on my left-hand needle for a cable, that's what I'm doing. And then I knit these two. So that's my 2/1 left purl cable. You know how to do that by this point. Then I'm supposed to purl 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. What you'll notice at this point is the pattern tells you exactly what these first 8 stitches are in reference to looking at your cable panel chart. It tells you exactly what these stitches are on your chart, so you can use your chart here for even across these stitches. If you don't have the VIP upgrade chart with the whole thing written across, this tells you exactly what stitches on your chart these first 8 stitches are. Now the pattern tells you to place a marker. Any clue why we want to place a marker? You know the answer to this. I know you know the answer to this. Okay, I'm going to tell you. Okay, so remember, right here is the start of our cable panel, right? Right where the cable is there, those 4-stitch cable for mine, 6-stitch cable for yours. So I'm adding a marker right here. So that way I can follow along my cable panel chart all the way over to my next marker, which, if you've been using markers all along, will be in place, okay? So this marker that I'm adding right here represents the start of a cable panel. So now the next 2 stitches of my 10 are the replacement for the 2 stitches that I moved to start with. So these 2 stitches here now are the second half of my 2/2 right cable. Now on this particular row, I'm just knitting these, okay? I'm just knitting these. And then I'm continuing on in my cable panel where I just knit those, right? Because it's a knit 4. And now I just continue on in my cable panel across 70 stitches total, all right? Once I get across 70 stitches total, I'm gonna just kind of pull these up. What that will be, so this will be 1 panel, 2 panels, 3 panels. The 70 stitches will be right here. It'll be 2 stitches past my 3rd marker, okay? So the 3rd marker that I already had in play. So I'll get right there, those 2 stitches. I will grab my other set of cast on that I did on my other holder, and I will butt these up right up to this. And I want to make sure that my tail is over here at this end, right? So what I could do is just butt those up right there. I can knit them directly off of the holder, or whatever works best for you at this point. But you'll work across those stitches because that's the other side of your sweater. So when all is said and done, you have stitches over here for a sleeve, stitches over here for a sleeve, and you have these stitches all on this side of the needle, okay? Once you've done that, once you've reached the end of this sleeve, You have all of these stitches back here up to where that's the round marker is, right? All of these stitches need to be handled. So you need to thread a piece of scrap yarn onto a tapestry needle and put all those stitches on some scrap yarn. Or like I said, if you have another set of needles to put all those on, put them on another set of needles. But all of these stitches, you're not going to work on those right now because that's the back of your sweater. What you're going to do now with these sleeve stitches over here, you're going to work back and forth across the front of your sweater up until you get to the point right before the neck. And then I want you to work the back of the sweater. So if you don't have two sets of needles, you're going to have to put your front of the sweater on a holder, scrap yarn, whatever it may be, and then use your needles for the back of the sweater to work across, okay? And then get them up to where you're at the same point on the back of the sweater. Then next class, next video, we'll talk about the neck and the finishing. Make sense? I know you guys can do this. It's very simply done if you are patient with yourself. I think the hardest part is working that cable right there onto your cast on stitches, which is why I want you to use a long tail cast on, because that gives you a row of knitting that you're actually going to cable there. So once you give yourself some time to get that done, and then working across your body in pattern is going to be pretty darn easy. Just remember, as you're working back across and you're reading your chart, make sure you read it the opposite direction. So what I mean by that is right here. Let's take a peek. So on this one, as I have been reading in the round, I continued from right to left, right to left, right to left. When I'm working flat, I'm going to go right to left, but on my way back, I go left to right to left to right, like a snake. So as you're making the front of your sweater, you want to make sure you're reading it like a snake, okay? All right, that's it for this video. Hopefully you got all of the instructions you need to carry on with your sweater. Make sure you are taking pictures as you work along and share with me on social media. Use hashtag MarleyBird or hashtag MBFirstFall, and I'll be sure to smash your like button. You all are doing fantastic, and I can't wait to see you in the next video where we will wrap this all up. Right? How you guys feeling? Are you a little intimidated? I hope not. I hope that I explained myself well enough on what you're doing for this portion of the sweater. Listen, I know that it is super helpful to have those extra charts that the VIPers get for this portion of the sweater. So if you have not yet joined the VIP and you're thinking, man, having that chart would be really useful, I encourage you to come and check it out. It's a really great way to experience a pattern because it's like a supercharged pattern. All of the instructions you need are in one place. You get a nice and tidy PDF plus all the extra charts. There's an extra pattern, there's extra instructions. It is just jam-packed full of information. So if you want to learn more about the VIP experience, make sure you click the link in the video description box below and come and join us. All right, guys, bye.